Welcome visitor, my name is Degwin and this is 16th part of the WoW Player's Diary. What do WoW players do when the content ends and there are still a few months until the new expansion? They start leveling alts, doing achievements and farming for transmogs, out legendaries and of course mounts. Since transmog didn't exist during Wrath of the Lich King, they mostly farmed achievements and mounts. I decided it was time to finally get exalted with Netherwing dragons in Outland. I had completed the initial quest chain to reach Nature with Netherwing back in summer 209. I wanted the mount back then, but after I started doing these dailies and actually flew on one, I lost the desire. Having a giant pair of wings flapping across half of the screen was really annoying, and I only learned to zoom the camera out much later. After that I would occasionally fly over Netherwing ledge to kill time before a raid. It wasn't often, but I had somehow accumulated enough reputation to be about halfway through Honored. So, after my raiding goals were met, I decided why not finish that. Completing all the dailies except for one in Nagran takes less than a half an hour, and I didn't have much left to grind. Plus, the end of the chain featured a meeting with Illidan, a flight on a massive dragon to Shatrat, and very nice mount that was much more beautiful than the ones from Wrath of the Lich King. I only did the daily quest, not bothering to search for eggs. However, I did find one or two that dropped from one veins and small limes in the caves while questing. I enjoyed the aerial races the most. By this point they weren't difficult at all. A year earlier they were much harder because it wasn't until patch 3.3 that players stopped getting dismounted, then hit by bombs. All you had to do was follow in the leader and not let him out of your sight. But at level 70 I imagine those flights were a real challenge. I can't recall any quest like this in the Wrath of the Lich King. The jousting dailies at the Argent tournament don't count. That stuff was a piece of a cake. I finished the quest and met with the Lord Illidan. Then I flew to Shatrat and chose the Onyx Netherwing Drake. In my opinion it was most stylish of them all. I also bought a couple of others from the vendor on the ledge just to have them. For a while it was only mount I used because my engineer flying machine had gotten boring after 6 months and the Drake flight animation had been fixed. Elemental Invasion. The pre-cataclysm event, which everyone was expecting after patch 4.0.1, began on November 1st. A group of NPCs appeared in Ironforge, and one of them, an Earthen Ring ambassador, gave the quest The Call of the Elements, which started the chain. He spoke of a disturbance among the elements throughout Azeroth, though the case was unclear. After that, we were sent to Arunak Stone Speaker in Stormwind. Upon arriving in Stormwind, I went to the famous Fountain Square where Arunak Stone Speaker was waiting. He first expressed his concern about the situation and then sent me to Stormwind Keep to find Gavan Greyfeather, a shaman from Wildhammer Dwarf clan. Inside the keep, we were met by the elderly dwarven shaman who told us that unrest had begun and the citizens were turning to all sorts of dangerous cults. At the end of the conversation, he sent us to another NPC, Captain Anton. Captain Anton told us that Doomsday cult had appeared in the city. Of course, you can see worse things on the streets of Stormwind, but this time it was causing much more concern than usual. The captain instructed us to listen to what the cultists were saying and to collect the leaflets they were disturbing. In total, we had to attend 4 of their rallies. After attending the rallies and collecting their leaflets, we returned to the captain, who decided that propaganda must be answered with a counter-propaganda. He then instructed us to post 5 of our own leaflets in the Old Town district. After educating the civilian population, we returned to the captain and he gave us our next task, to infiltrate the ranks of the cultists. Overall, the pre-launch event started out quite interesting, but the second and third phases could hardly be called an invasion. The whole thing began explosively but quickly faded out. The shaking in the cities became more intense, but that was all about it. The new quest trickled in slowly and took about 10 minutes to complete. Infiltrating the cults, listening to the Cho'Gall's lectures, and running around with a sign on your chest to persuade cultists to report was all fine and dandy, but it didn't feel like a real invasion. A couple of weeks later, in mid-November, the fourth phase finally began, and this time it actually felt like a proper invasion. One evening I logged onto my bank account and noticed the screen shaking more intensively than usual. People in chat were saying something was wrong and shouting for everyone to go to Stormwind. I was skeptical at first, knowing how players on Gordunia love the troll, but an NPC's guard panicked comment convinced me it was real. I quickly switched to my main, ported from Nagran to Dalaran, and then onto Stormwind. When I arrived, all the tower's exits were blocked. The only way out was through a portal. It dumped me right in the front of the city gates. I ran inside and was met with an incredible sight. The capital streets were filled with elementals and players were enthusiastically fighting them off. My first thought was, wow, I've never seen such chaos. My time fighting elementals didn't last long, however. On November 23, 210, Path 4.0.3a was deployed to live service. Before the patch went live, I parked my men in Ashara. I've always loved that zone for its ancient elven ruins, gloomy sunset, and the Naga crawling along coast. After the path, I changed dramatically, and I still don't like how the goblins have developed it. Path 4.0.3a. This path brought the following changes to the game. Portals were removed from Dalaran and Shattra, so these cities lost their status as major transport hubs. It was time to move our mains. Before, it made sense to keep them in Dalaran, which was the center of activity and so busy it was nicknamed Lagaran. Leaving Northrend now required taking a steamship or a zeppelin. Class trainers were installed in place of the portals, though it was unclear who needed them anymore since a mass exodus from Northrend was about to begin. New class race combinations became available, with exceptions of goblins and worgen, which will be available during release. New starting areas for gnomes and trolls, the Echo Isles and Gnomiragan, became active. The world was shattered. The earth and sky flooded, the seas overflowed their banks. In general, all the changes to the old world that had previously only seen in a beta screenshots finally appeared on live service. Instead of boring Sindragoza Deathwing now appeared on the login screen and remained there for the next 2 years. There was a new intro cinematic, new music, and new loading screens. Druids, paladins, priests, and shamans had their talent points reset. A new class balance pass went into effect. Vendors selling reputation tablets appeared in capital cities. The experience required to level from 71 to 80 was once again reduced by 20%. New pets became available for hunters. And finally, Deathwing's arrival and the 2 weeks of terror that followed it were also expected. The retired aspect was flying over the old world, setting fire to everything he saw. I always considered my server Gordunia to be full of well-informed nerds, or at least there should have been more knowledgeable people there than anywhere else, since it was one of the top progression servers in Europe. After logging in on Path Night, I looked at the trade chat and realized that people not only don't read Path notes, but apparently hadn't even skimmed the news. How else could you explain comments like, "Where did the Galaran portals go?" And "What happened to the pack and the Stormwind? Where do they sell the new gear?" How do you get to new zones, and where do you learn to fly in Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdoms? It seemed like these people had only seen Dalaran and the first wing of ICC for the last couple of months. I was in a state of minor culture shock. If people can't be bothered to read a few paragraphs in a news site for their favorite game before a path, how did they manage to get through school? But overall it was funny time. The shattering had happened, but the Cataclysm expansion hadn't officially launched. The bulletin boards where you could get quests for new zones were already up but weren't active. The archaeology trainer stood in the Hall of Explorers doing nothing, as training for new profession wasn't yet available. New gear was at the vendors, but it required level 85, and an experience bar was still capped. That thing had already destroyed zones in Kalimdor and Eastern Kingdoms, but you couldn't fly over them yet. In short, you could look, but you couldn't touch. In any case, the Wrath of the Lich King era had officially ended. Well, this is all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if so, give it thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Well, to be continued. Thank you for your attention.